most of you know me by now, either for good or for bad. But if ever you don't, I'll be sticking around for autographs afterwards. So just trying to be competition to Dr. Musgrave here. So you can really tell you're important when you're being slaughtered right after lunch, because everybody's mainly falling asleep, full belly. All right. So I really would like to thank all of you guys for that. But all right, so let's dive into it. So when I got a call from Doug Younger, that's really when I realized, because we all know Doug, that's really how I realized how well Doug actually fits in the industry. Because like most of the people in the industry, Doug called me in a panic. He said, I'm in trouble. I have one spot I need to fill. I have somebody else better than you that bailed out on me. So that was just last week. So all right, I said, actually, Doug, I'll do it, okay? But don't feel bad. You at least called me last week, not on the day of, so thank you.
Thank you for doing it.
No worries.
Pretty correct.
Yeah. So speaking of Doug, so we actually started talking about putting a presentation together about a few of the experience with the technology. It was pretty fancy, the introduction that we just got. But we're wanting to talk a little bit about the issues that we've been having, the opportunities for improvement, also identified. So just before we do get there, though, we're going to be talking about a few things, but that's mainly where we're going to be focusing. Of course, the integration of the anti-collision and the opportunities for improvement that we've had to overcome, and the opportunities that still remain. So, as I said, Doug wanted me to talk about this technology, the hurdles, the difficulties and issues we have been going through. And he wanted me to try to blend this all together. It didn't really matter what I was going to talk about, but as long as I took about 45 minutes, that was the end goal. So we'll try to think to make that happen. So, of course, as I didn't have really much choice, I started thinking about it, and it dawned on me that it has now been over 10 years since Doug and I actually first collaborated in this new crane initiative. So that brought a lot of big memories. I totally understand it's a very small time frame compared to our farm boy legacy that we just heard, but still 10 years for the crane initiative is pretty good. So I really don't want to get too emotional. But I just have to say that it got me thinking. So on the first crane that Doug and I actually climbed, and all the memories that were created. So from that moment on, I got to admit that Doug and I were really bonded for life. So, I don't want to. I'm sure you can tell which one's Doug. Okay. But yeah, we've been bonded ever since. All right. So, as you can tell, a lot has changed since those 10 years, Doug. I've gained some weight, turned gray, and you've got promoted. So that's good. Thank you for your leadership. Okay, so it's a mouthful, but today we're going to talk about integrating technology into crane operations, particularly its implications and opportunities for improvement. So, available technologies that we have, I hate these glasses, but I need them, sorry. Web-based preventive maintenance system. I'm just going to run through some of the technology that is available out there. We've all heard about the insulated lift technology as well, integrated real-time GPS positioning systems. Of course, the range limiting anti-collision devices, load cells, pins, LMIs. Some of the newer cranes come with them. Some of the older ones that we talked about don't necessarily, the vintage cranes, don't necessarily have all those features. However, a lot are getting on board with them. Crane data management system that we're going to be talking, as well as viewing systems. So, interesting fact that I learned from Dr. Musgrave. Am I accurate to say that the space shuttle was operating on a 64K? So that's the amount of data, you know, the little data sticks that you just got from WorkSafe? Well, that one is how big? Do you know? A gig, maybe? Well, so the space shuttle was actually working on 64K. And most of the systems that we now install in cranes or the PLCs and all of that are way beyond that. So makes you wonder with the 64K how they managed to do what they did. So a great feat that they managed to do. This is what we have to work with. I know it's not as pretty as seeing Saturn or the nebulas out there, but it kind of goes back to all of you in the room, the challenges that we have to work with. We have cranes that are colliding or are in a potential path of collision. Those power lines are everywhere. Operators are operating in the blind. We all have our production deadlines and so on that must be met. So it really comes to a point that I met somebody not too long ago, and they said, and I say this with all the respect, but he says, we're just all carpenters trying to keep up here, okay? Because we're so evolving with the technology, the rapid pace, the drop boxes, and all these computer apps and all of that to try to organize, and everything just goes faster, and more is just expected from everyone. So, like we talked about, downtime, production efficiency, and costs are all important components and must be integrated into the matrix and are all number one. So when it comes time to install more stuff on a crane, because you've got already so much to deal with, most of the time this is what I get, the reaction that I get, okay? So, and it's normal because it's an information overload. We've got so much things that we need to do. So when you think about it, why is crane safety technology seen as a cost and not integrated into the planning and production process of construction? We're just starting right now to get calls maybe a month ahead of a crane going up saying, we've got power lines, we have a system that needs to go up. I know there's been discussion going about, okay, well, we have a building, we're gonna need a crane for it. So those discussions probably happened a year before. So it's at that time that we need to start talking about everything around the cranes. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it is still not necessarily happening. And then when I say that, it's not necessarily happening for us. It probably isn't happening for some of the crane suppliers out there as well that have to meet those deadlines and so on and so forth, modify a jib length to meet the criteria of the job and so on. So definitely those are things that we all know about, and like Barry was saying, we need to go down and in the weeds and say it out. We have to consider all the safety aspects, the constraints that we might be dealt with or handed or dealt. We have to consider those right from earlier on in the project for all of us to succeed. So at the end, doesn't technology help us reduce downtime, increase production efficiency while allowing us to do it safely? I think we've proven that yes it does, as long as we do it properly. So that's the biggest issue that we're faced with right now, is as long as we do the safety and the integration in a safe manner. So you got a question, how much does it weigh? Can technology help with that? Like I said at the beginning, load cells, LMI, load pins, we have that, okay? And when I say we, it's not just us as a company, it's us as an industry. Things are available out there to help us for lifting in the blind, okay? Why are we still lifting in the blind when there are camera systems that are there? So, yes, sir.
Do you have access to data that shows how many incidents are attributed to overloads or lifting in the blind?
No, the answer is no.
So
but
that's a big problem.
And-
Because if you had that data, it'd probably be quite easy to justify why you need to take that step.
So we're going to continue on with the presentation and talk about the data, because that's definitely one of the things I want to talk about, but thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate it. So definitely, if you look at the viewing systems, well, what would you rather have? A nice view of the sky, or realizing how up you are in the air, or actually be able to see your load? And that's not only for the operator, it's also available for all the managers that are out there. So if ever some of you want to review your job sites, there's even companies out there that are interested for billing reason. They want to see how much concrete they've actually poured. So they actually have a pre-recording of the cameras. They ask the operator just to sweep the top of the tower. And then when it's time to do the invoicing on the Monday, they just go and look at the video feed instead of having to send somebody or wait for reports. So there's different ways that we can use the technology that's available to us. Preventive maintenance, I know it's a big topic and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I think we're at a point where we need to make a good step forward. I think there's a lot of good systems out there. We probably all have our own tailored systems, paper-based, pictures, notes, work orders, bills that we have to pay, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we can use technology to do a lot more, have reminders, checklists like Dr. Mulgrave was talking about, like checklists on what needs to be done. I know we have our installation checklist, but there's more than that. What do you check on the electrical side of your cranes before it goes up? What do you check on the mechanical side of it before it goes up? And so on and so forth. So all of those things, there are, like I think it was Ryan last year that says, yeah, there's an app for that. So yes, there is an app for that. So, okay. I think it's just a question of adopting it and then generating the reports that need to get generated to be able to meet compliance. So basically, we can turn the paperwork into something that you all carry with you today. So if something happens and somebody wants to let you know what you're being asked a question, when's the last time that we did an inspection on those mast sections that are rusted, we can provide that information. And of course, can we be more efficient? Barry, better listen up. Okay? Data, data, data. Okay? It almost looks like we were accomplices on this. So I don't know if some of you have watched The Great Hack. Does that mean something about Facebook and Cambridge Analytica and all of those people? It's in a way, it's all about data. It's the most valuable resource that we have. And right now, we're integrating systems on the cranes. We're putting them on, but we're not benefiting from all the data. Exactly like Barry was saying. The data is there with the equipment, the technology that we have now. We can actually get reports that are generated automatically for us. How many times do we get close? Makes us look at our system. Well, maybe we move the production around a little bit. Maybe we change a little bit of the process that in the long run is not only going to make it safer, but it's also going to make it more productive, okay? And I know when we talk about productivity, okay, that's where everybody makes their money, okay? So definitely data is available. I think we just have to look as an industry what we want to do and look forward in implementing these systems so that we can generate the data, analyze them, and then be able to say, yes, now we really have something solid to work with. It's different than just saying, yes, there was a study that was done. When you install a camera, you save 20%. You can operate 20% faster. But then again, if you have the camera actually installed on your crane, you can actually look at the efficiency gains that you get. So that's all part of the data. So I don't have the data right now. The capabilities are there, okay? But the demand is not there. Is it because of lack of awareness of it? Or is it because we're not ready to see the data? That is also one question that we should be asking ourselves. Working near power lines, I did talk about the tagline, the insulator. That's not only for protecting our people on the ground, which is very important, but also your equipment. So you can actually have some links that you can put on your crane, and then you secure the rigging from that link. So those links, they may look like just plastic, but they're rated for over 20 tons or whatever requirements that you need. So we can remove a lot of the hazards, so why risk it? And then finally, we go into the multi-crane, the public safety, or the utility hazard, so the power lines. So that's where we're going to slow down a little bit and talk about our range limiting and anti-collision devices. So a lot of questions that we get for these devices, well, okay, if I put the zoning, how much more is it going to cost to put the anti-collision feature? Okay, well, the zoning is normally to protect a public area from, as an example, SkyTrain. It can be any asset that we need to protect, or maintain limits of approach from energized conductors. So, and the other one is the anti-collision. So what's the difference between the two? Well, the only thing you need is to make sure you've got systems on all the assets you want to protect, and one communicates with the other. So all the systems, I believe, that are out there available that do this job right now have both capabilities. There are some systems that come OEM with cranes that will only allow to do the zoning. They will not allow to do the crane to crane, because maybe the crane that it's going to go with is not going to be equipped with the same level of technology. Okay, so that's what we have to make sure, is that at least we have the same compatible interfaces that talk to each other from crane to crane. If you have that, then it doesn't matter if you're doing zoning or you're doing crane to crane. The job is not harder for us to do it. So there's always that possibility that if you have power lines on your site and you want to add the crane to crane, then you can definitely do it. Oh, what did I do? All right. So this is just a quick view of it's a lot of pieces and components and so on and so forth to install these systems on cranes. And I really have to say thank you to the industry, because everybody, when the crane is in a yard, all the experts out there on the crane owners, the rental companies, they are really, really accommodating when it comes time to work on their piece of equipment. They're always there to give us advice. So we couldn't do this without you, so thank you very much. Sometimes not a lot of praise goes out for you guys, but we really do appreciate all the help that you're giving us. So what have we learned throughout the years? So again, this is kind of my little character to say, well, a lot of surprises, because most of the time, like I said, we're going to get a call a week ahead of time, crane's going up, but we just learned through a WorkSafe BC visit that the crane cannot be operational until there's a device on it. Okay, and I know there was some changes, and there's also a little bit more enforcement that goes around that, and education. So that caused us to have a problem in availability. Okay, so it's just like a question of demand and supply. So the issue meeting demand, we're getting over it right now, but still we do appreciate the ones that give us a heads up. So a few of us do have processes in place, and you take into consideration, but that's one of the opportunities for improvement, is if we could just think a little bit more ahead, that would be beneficial. And it would also help to avoid putting some people at risk, because all the work that we can actually do in a yard when we're not stressed is way easier to do there than actually do it up on a crane when you're suspended on a jib. So we do appreciate the heads up. Of course, we're talking about integration of controls, so electrical schematics. In general, We have them for most of your cranes. If not, most of you guys are great. You provide all the electrical schematics. This is going to become more and more predominant in our operations or in our dealings with you and the customer in order for us to be able to meet compliance, because we got to make sure that the electrical schematics are actually what is happening in the crane. Some, however, are outdated, paper-based, or not matching the crane, and I don't think it's anything that we're doing negligently, because there's so many cranes that have, they're all SK 180s or whatever, and SK 400s and 415s and all that what we see with the cranes, it doesn't matter. It can be two serial numbers, one after the other, and they're going to be different. They're going to be wired differently. So back in the day when they were built, there's a big difference sometimes in even a one serial number difference in a crane. So it's probably a very honest mistake to take drawings from this one and put it in that one. So that's something that we have to work, and sometimes we're going to be pestering some of the crane owners to try to get the proper drawings. Minimum requirements, when I was talking about cranes, I don't want to be too technical, but the pre-planning, again, is very important. One of the hardest part is to put those potentiometers inside of the trolleys. So not to go too technical on you, it's just like the volume knob on your radio. So when your trolley's at the tip, the volume's high. When your trolley's at the heel, the volume is low. So that potentiometer, if we don't have it there, we cannot tell where the trolley is along the jib. So that's very important. Certification of range limiting anti-collision systems. Well, probably going to make WorkSafe happy here. The products that we're putting on the cranes must all be CSA approved. It's not that we were putting a fight to try to not get them approved. It's just because Canada is such a small market. So I think it goes back to Ron's original question this morning about getting some of the international standards recognized. But in the meantime, because Canada is such a small market and these systems are built to other standards, they don't have the CSA stamp on it. So what we've ended up doing is upgrading some of the components to meet the standards and also proceed with the special inspections, the SPE 1000-13 through the CSA group. So we've managed to get those. So all the units that we've been putting up, I would say in the last close to 6 months, all have those certificates. And the good news is that all the units that we've been putting up in the last 10 years can all be upgraded to the same standard. So it's not like the units that have been purchased or are installed are no good. It's just we have to go through the process. And also the other thing is that the integration, it's not as easy as just putting a switch or putting Christmas lights, is that you have to make sure that the integration is, because it's recognized as a modification of controls. So I'm sure, Dean, you're happy to see that up there. So because it is recognized as a modification of controls, it requires certification as safe for use after install. So certification must be provided by either the manufacturer, which is very difficult to get by the crane manufacturer, or a PEng. So we were lucky enough to have the EGBC Stuart that was here and talked a little bit about that. So definitely a recognized professional engineer to confirm that the install is done as per, and the piece of equipment is safe for use. So what we've been doing for the last 6 months is basically, for those of you who have seen us on your job sites, we are now taking more time to do an install. The reason that we're taking more time for the install is that we're actually converting the cranes and putting PLCs in them that are going to stay with the crane so that we can do one modification of the control and only get one certification done. And after that, if we remove and put the system again, remove, put it again, remove, put it again, it doesn't matter. We will have crossed that step and met the regulatory requirements. So it's taking a little bit more time. I appreciate everybody's patience on it, but it's what we need to do to meet the compliance. And of course, we got to prepare a full package and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, when you're calling us the week before and we need to put an anti-collision system, and you say, okay, well, we can't operate until the crane has a system on, that's where it's not easy as just putting a screwdriver and integrating the system. We do have to make sure the systems are CSA approved, that we are preparing the package eventually for a PN to review and all of that. So at the end of the day, it does take a lot of time. Okay, it may look like a little detail, but it takes an enormous amount of time for us to be able to meet the regulatory requirements, which we are pleased to do, but keep in mind it takes some time. Any questions so far? Yes.
What are you finding as far as limits of approach being introduced to you on paper before you're putting in the system? So that when you're programming, you're actually programming to what someone else has told you that the limits of approach is. Because in my eyes, that's just as important as all the engineering that we've been talking to. Have a professional tell us what the limits of approach are on that. Now, I know that we can generally figure it out, but it's not right for us to figure out electrical hazard for the sake of the job.
Oh, and very good question, and that I'd have to refer to you as the 30M33, but I will explain more about it. So basically we've had that discussion before, Bob and I, and we've been asked to actually on our installation report to say, okay, well, how close, when you tested it, how close do you go to the limits of to the lines or to the building and so on and so forth. So basically what we're doing is referring to the 30M33. I know there are, and this is an opportunity for clarification, maybe with WorkSafe as well. I know there's some officers out there that are wanting the end users to have the system respect the limits of approach in consideration of any load that they might be handling. So if you have a 40-foot rebar and if you don't have the taglines or whatever reason, when you think about it, it can actually, you'd have to be at least 30 feet away from the power lines in order to make sure you respect the limits of approach. So that is something that we have refrained from doing and writing in our reports, because at the end of the day, the end user is the one that has to make sure that those limits are respected. So on our side of things, what we're doing is making sure that the load block cannot breach the limits of approach when we install it. But this is something that is not for us, but for the industry, maybe to bring a clarification on, because if you have to take into consideration the lengths of your loads, there's definitely a 20% of the surface area of job sites that you're never going to be able to reach. So,
I think that's the point, Paul, is that that's what officers are saying is take into consideration your loads. If you're going up to a 10-foot limit of approach and your load's 20 feet on, you're going to be in the limit of approach of your load. So planning for that, pre-planning, identifying that risk, is working that into your job plan with your crew, your workers and the operator, to understand that is where we're at. So we're on the same page as that.
But that's an obvious, that's really an operation issue. I'm asking, when you're setting up your system, like you and I have worked on a site recently where Hydro had not provided limits of approach for the power lines that you were setting up for around, and we're chasing paperwork like a lot in order to get that. 30 and 33 is generally when they've got the flagging on and they give you the finished paperwork. On some sites, they're providing a piece of paper beforehand saying flagging is required or an anti-collision system, and your limits of approach on this job site are, they're usually standard 3 meters, but at least you have a piece of paper that says that we're all working as per the experts on the power have addressed. Because on some job sites, they're just saying no, they can't do the flagging tower too high. Well, into that like down in the sawmill, right?
Yeah, and
how often are you running into this that we're not getting that piece of paper on the job sites that's giving us the limits of approach?
I'm probably 25% of the time.
Because like Doug and I had the conversation over the 3 DC power supply sidewalks that we're not getting paperwork on either, right? And they're more deadly than the power lines, the AC poles. You touch them, you're fried, you're dead. You don't get a second chance. The AC, you get sparked off, right? There's a shortfall here.
Yeah, I think you're talking two different systems, of trolley with the DC?
Yeah, but the power, we're not getting the paperwork for the power.
Well, I think there's an obligation on both sides. If it's hydro, it's obviously a 30M33 document in 1924, that you need to know what the tower is, and a plan to safely work around it. So you would have to have a 30M33 from the power authority, which in most cases is hydro in our location, to tell you what it is, so you could plan for your limit of approach to that, whatever the power is. If it's DC and it's trolley, it's TransLink, Buck over here, and that's the power authority in that case, and that's your go-to people to talk about those power lines and follow their limits of approach for the DC, for the 600 volt DC for the trolley. Correct, Buck?
That's correct. I mean, not to detract from Paul's presentation.
It's counting in my time, it's perfect. Keep going.
It has all to do with you can have a system without this
Yep.
number.
Yep.
So the one thing I'd like to add to that, TransLink will already be in contact working with the developer who is hiring the GC, that's hiring the operator. And so at the development stage, we're already dealing with them, considering our requirements for approach and for some collision avoidance technology at that stage. So if you're dealing with TransLink, theoretically, at least for a fixed tower crane, it shouldn't be a surprise. The limits we're broadcasting really far in advance, and the developers are already signed on. They're going to be a collision avoidance system that's programmed to match requirements.
And I can attest to that we usually, when there's the SkyTrain that is involved, definitely we do get a fair heads up. I think what you're talking about, Bob, is more the trolley lines for the bus, the 600, the 3 lines for the,
Service lines.
And so it's a little bit more recent, but the same process is being applied. So when there's work going on in the city of Vancouver, they're triggering the developers to be in contact with TransLink. And we've obviously got a little bit of challenges going on right now, today, but in terms of generally getting those approvals through and getting the public ones protected and really accommodated for the work, I think we're trying to be very responsive to those
and
requests.
if I'm,
Getting the word out.
yeah, and if I may add, I was just invited by Buck there to go sit down with him and get a better clarification of the path that they're going in, so that we can better educate the industry on the 600 volt DC as well.
So if, maybe Doug, maybe you can answer this then. If we're going on a job site where I'm calling Paul for an anti-collision based on power lines, and there's not supporting paperwork for limits of approach, without creating a big fuss on the job site, because it's gonna be my client, or it's gonna be, in most cases, it's gonna be a client of whoever's dealing with the crane. So you're not looking to stir up shit, but you're trying to solve the problem so that everybody goes forward properly. What would you be suggesting as far as pursuing that paperwork?
I would call for the 30M33 for
So ask the general to go back to Hydro asking for 30M33?
either the general or yourself. I mean,
But that was done on this job that I'm referencing to, you know who I'm talking to, and we're still waiting for paperwork.
That discussion only piece of the 30F33 the prime contractors can use, so that's a big portion of having this meeting and figuring out the voltage and locations. They'll put the voltage and the locations. Off of that, you look at our table, which tells you what your radial distances of that. So all the information's there to have these pre-discussions with each one of the owners. Hydro will send out a rep, as well as TransLink, and you can do that in your pre-construction meetings. I've been involved with many around town, where the Hydro rep's standing there at the same time as the TransLink tech rep. They're looking at all the hazards of the site before the crane goes up. So I think this is reach out to your team, same as the gas lines and the gas act.
well, I'll take my best to take this offline, and let Paul carry on.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it just happens on some occasion, like it just falls between the crack. I think in this situation, we've been having more difficulties than others. Usually it does tend to work well. One of the things that we are working on to try to better the system as well is putting out a list of requirements. So if we know more than a week ahead of time, because obviously everybody's busy, and I'm pretty sure if we get a call out to BC Hydro, they might not respond between like within the 7 days that we need that answer for. So again, as soon as we know that your site is going to need a system, we send out a list of the requirements, and in that requirement, there's a clear indication, please specify the limits of approach that are to be respected. So if that's where we need more leeway a little bit. So with the participation of the industry, making sure that we get those requests in earlier, we're going to solve these last minute things. So, okay, thank you. Okay, so speaking of time, other opportunities for improvement in regards to the systems use. The industry buy-in. I think, you know what, I think in general the industry is buying in. We're still doing many installs when we face, like Barry was saying, I'm going in the weeds here, but we're facing some critique that we get on the job site. Well, I've been told I need the system, so put it on. A lot of people are going to be hands-off in the process. So I can't blame them in a way because it's a complex system, but I think that we have an opportunity for the sites that do need to have these systems, that we actually need to have somebody who's going to take this on the sites locally, because the situation that ends up happening is that the operators at the end of the day are the ones that are using the device, and they're the ones that, even though we submit a presentation, we're there with them when we install the system, they're testing the limits of approach and all of that, we're doing all the training. The next day might be a different operator. Okay, so a new site, new crane, he's got to figure out this system, and we're always there, we're always a phone call away, but at the end of the day, if there would be somebody on site that would actually take potentially some more ownership of the functionality of the system, that would definitely allow us to transfer the knowledge and also prevent some issues that we've been having. So as an example, no, it's not a bomb, but maybe it's not as complicated as NASA, okay? But, so I've had really interesting calls. So it's just a flashing light. What does the flashing light mean? Where do we install the flashing light? It goes underneath the counter deck of a tower crane. All right, so if you'll never see it, well, yeah, you might see it like this, but there's a reason why you see it like that. So it goes underneath, okay? What is it for? It's to show you that the system has been bypassed. Okay, so it's not the opposite. So I have many operators that will tell site that doesn't know what the system is. Oh yeah, when the light's flashing, the system's on. So that's why I think it's really beneficial for some people on site to actually get to know these systems, how they work, okay? I got another slide here. So this one, if you look all the way to the right, see the hard hat that's there? That's another strobe light right there. So we see that really often, okay? So what do? They take the strobe light, they put it on top of the counter deck. So when they put it in bypass, do you see it? No, you don't. So you're spending a lot of money to have systems up on the crane. We're all happy, the primes are happy because we're meeting compliance, we have a system, we're maintaining our limits of approach, and by the stroke of a key, an operator can put it in bypass and nobody will ever know. So that comes back to, can I stop this now? Do we know what this means? What does it mean? System operational? No. Okay, it means the system is bypassed, all right? And the operator can do that with the key, which is why we're now asking, and WorkSafe wrote an administrative IR on Opticrane to educate everybody that uses these systems to make sure that they have a bypass management protocol in place. So the bypass management protocol is basically just a document that says, you know what, the system might have a component, a failure. You might have a critical lift you need to do or something, and you need to have full control of the crane. So that's why we leave the keys on site so the operator can put it underneath the monitor. Like you see there's a little key, a quarter of a turn, turns bypass, okay? So it still gives the operator audible as well as visual warnings, but it will not take effect in slowing and stopping the crane down, okay? And of course, the one on the right, we haven't seen for many years now, but that was one that we've seen, and I guess the operator didn't like the system, so went in there, did a little bit of pulling wires, and finally got his crane to work like he wanted. So tampering of systems has been clarified, and it's a safety device you put on a crane, so if you tamper with it, there are consequences in the regulation that you have to make sure that you respect the safety devices. So again, opportunities for improvement. Data, Barry. Okay, so this is all available. We can use optimization for productivity, safety, and compliance. So the issue, we're not using the available data. I think it's all about insufficient education on the benefits of these data, like we were talking about. So we'll be glad, I'll be happy. I've been invited to LEDCOR. I've been invited at a few places, and they want to know more about the systems. We'll gladly go and explain what is available out there. You can even receive on our phones, we can receive alerts for safety non-compliance, overloads, bypass, crane faults, maintenance requirements. You can inquire on the crane status from the ground. How much is he lifting right now? So I know some companies have, it doesn't really happen in our area, but bigger sites where they have like I want to say like a Kiewit or when they're building different type of construction than us, like not high rise, more hydro dams and stuff like that. They're going to have critical lifts that they have to put together. Well, they want to know, are we respecting our critical lifts? Well, this technology can actually, you can ask a crane without bothering the operator, what's the status of your crane right now? What maximum load are you at? Okay. You can manage crane usage by setting up the idle time, detection of proximity to one another, the bypass reports and notifications. There are no black boxes right now that I'm aware of in the cranes that have range limiting devices in our area. Not that I'm aware of. There are some other suppliers, maybe there's some, I don't know, but those black boxes are available. We can put them in. We can actually know if the crane was operational or put in bypass. And with our experience, and I've met with a lot of you here, that we've had some crane contacts with power lines, and I appreciate the operators coming straight out and saying, you know what, I had it in bypass. Because either they were trying to go faster that day or reach a corner that they couldn't. Why did they were not able to reach that corner? Maybe there was an adjustment required on the system. So that's another opportunity for improvement right there. Make sure you call us when there's a system that needs to be readjusted. Another point that was brought up while we're talking about the bypass is in case of emergency. So as an opportunity for improvement, I just thought I'd use this platform just to trigger your minds. We all talked about the DEP, making sure the DEP's located within reach of the crane if we're doing a climb or something like that, because when you're climbing, you can't move, you can't swing your crane. Got to make sure you can reach the DEP. Well, in addition to that, if you're climbing it and something happens and you need to, not even if you're climbing it, but if you're just in regular operation, but you've got a whole quadrant that is marked out for whatever reason, in our safety or emergency procedures, do we know exactly where the key is? Do we know who is the owner of the key? I know you have it in your bypass protocol, but in case of an emergency, a person's life is on the balance here, so we can't waste time looking for a key. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because 2 weeks ago we were on a job site, we were told they didn't have a key. So it took us a week to finally figure out that, yes, they did have the key, but nobody knew where it was. So I think the key is the key to our success in this case. We have to make sure that we know where it is at all time. We have a manager that, or a designated person with an alternate. They're going to know where that key is. And also, please be aware that there are some keys that are getting reproduced. So operators are taking keys and they are reproducing them. Okay? So that's, each system has an individual key number, but they are, we're seeing keys that are doubled. Okay? So these are all things that you should be aware, because there's a lot of money that is being spent and putting on the systems, but there's still, I believe, the culture change that Doug wanted me to talk about. This is the culture change that we have to talk about openly and say, okay, well, if we're investing money and we're putting these systems for the better good, to make sure we don't hurt anybody, that we don't hit power lines, that we make sure cranes don't fall, well, we need to make sure that the buy-in of everybody, so people on site, the operators, everybody actually buys into the system, so we don't, by the action of one individual or one person that doesn't call, puts all the entire site in jeopardy. So that's all I have. Any questions? Yes.
So, I really appreciate the light, and thanks for the blinding.
I can do it again if you want.
It's normally mounted in a position where, depending on the height of the structure, it may not be visible to the people that are on the pointy end of the stick. And I'm wondering if you or contemplated any installation of the bypass plate more towards the tip or in proximity to the hook.
Proximity to the hook would be difficult because it would actually have to be wireless in a way, but that's a very good point. I'm sure technology can solve that. At the tip is not a problem. It just has to be at a standard position that everybody's going to agree on. So I think the counter jib, yeah, it may not be visible from the location that you're at, but I'm yet to see a crane that I didn't see the counter jib when I'm driving. If I don't see it on a corner, I go on the other corner, I'm going to see if it's bypassed or not. So, but we can definitely have a look at that. And if the industry says, yeah, we want a light at another spot at the tip of the jib, maybe they're not going to go and remove it as often. So maybe that's the option. What's that? Yeah, well, that's the thing. If we just have to have it wirelessly, and then the rigger's going to take it. So. Multiple location. Okay, Christmas lights. So we're going to have blinking Christmas lights coming up next year. So they're not going to be for Christmas. They're going to be for bypass of the system. So it's an opportunity. There's definitely something. I think I'd go the faster route through data management, which you can actually get a notification if you're responsible for the safety of let's say, your entire company. You would want to know if your crane is bypassed, you can get a text sent to your phone. So I think ideally, instead of looking for the light, we should probably move towards the technology that is available. Yes?
We'll get some of these systems certified by the actual manufacturers.
Like I was indicating, it is,
Besides Paco.
well, each manufacturer does have a preferred system that they work with, a preferred system provider. And when you're buying cranes, the new cranes, if you're fortunate enough and you want to buy new cranes, those systems is like an option in a car. You can decide to have it or not. But all the cranes that have been manufactured after 2006 actually have a designated area where you can actually plug in, and you don't need those to get recertified. So that's one thing. But the systems themselves, if they come with a potane or whatever, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, not actual manufacturer zoning systems, the ones that we're buying, not
Yeah.
knowing that they're okay with putting in their cranes, and it's not gonna mess things up.
Mm-hmm. So getting the certification from the manufacturers themselves.
Yeah, it'd be like, hey, this is my system. I've gone to Liebherr, I've gone to propane. They'll say that this is compliant with the system we use.
Yeah, well, most of the manufacturers will not proceed with that because when they were produced, they were not necessarily, the systems were not, I won't say designed, but the cranes were not designed at the time to have those systems. So it's a retrofit application that you're doing, which is why we need to go with the PN certification for the control end of things. But we can definitely pursue that discussion if you want.
Well, I've just seen them where they come across, we designed our system around the bears, and the bears signed off on our systems.
Yeah, yeah. So the same thing as an example, the system for the newer Lee Bears, you have to have a CSM 485 or a Leetronic interface because most of them, the newer ones, all work with CAN bus. So instead of going through the contactors and doing all our connections there, we just put 2 wires in and computers talking to each other. And yeah, so that has been developed with Lee Bear, and it is compliant with them, but those are seldom and few apart that we have actually the newer stock.
No, most systems that we have to use right now are on older machines.
Mhm.
That's the majority of the cranes that are in town are old machines.
Yeah,
They didn't come with these originally.
correct.
But yes, if you're buying a new machine, knowing the way things are going, you're gonna purchase that machine with a zoning system.
Mhm.
It's the older ones that, yes.
The only thing that I'd make sure, remember that there's the zoning and the collision system. So if you have a multi-crane site, you're gonna wanna make sure if you buy that option in your crane and you go with the manufacturer, you gotta end up having the same type of crane so that they're compatible. So that's the thing you wanna make sure that that's gonna be a good option for you. Anybody else? Yes? Oh, I got a good question coming up here.
Does the crane industry have simulators?
Yes, they are simulators for the crane industry, yes. Yes. And I know of a few that were at the Port Authority, I believe. Operating engineers have a couple. Yeah, so,
So the technology is there. Every X-rated that I get is very complex air machines. 100% of my training and my certification and my test drive is done in the simulator.
mhm.
In very, very off-nominal conditions, it's a place where you can test all the contingencies, and what could happen. And they're also very useful for design and development of the next machine.
Mhm.
So, but you are doing that.
There are some simulators that are in use specifically for operator training at this moment, not necessarily to check the technology that goes into those, because it's not replicated. It's a computer-based simulator compared to the more contactor-type based cranes that we have to work with. Thank you. Anybody else? I thought I saw a couple more hands. Yes?
A thought for anybody who's purchasing a new crane with a generic system. You need people local people that are able to set and maintain it. So I would be somewhat apprehensive to just, Liebherr has a certain product. Who's going to program it? Who's going to maintain it? So that's not necessarily the answer. Just a thought.
And they are, like, obviously, we're not the only ones. There are definitely other qualified people to take care of different brands, makes, and models. And there are some, let's say a Liebherr, maybe they're going to favor a certain type of system.
They may be a plane ride away if you need programming or service.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, there was some issue that clarification, I think it'd be work safe more than anything, but I've seen projects where cranes are going over power lines. They have a 30M33, but they're not required to have a zone system. So that's kind of apples and oranges, not fair to the contractors that spend the money. So we've seen this in a few issues now. So clarification of the code of the 30M33 and when a zone system is required should be across the board the same for everyone. And we're seeing that's not happening.
There's a hierarchy controls under 1925 with a regulation for working. 1924 is a regulation that keeps you out of the power lines, you're not gonna go within it, and there's a hierarchy for 1925. So that hierarchy of control, develop, remove, ground, underground, and then lastly flagging, guarding. And in there is also the limiting device that keeps you out of that, the option to go to a limiting device. So that, I don't wanna take the presentation, but again, there's a hierarchy of controls to follow, and that's what we enforce as a regulator and the officer. That's what the employers need to look at, and again, like Paul's, presentation alludes to, that's time. Planning, pre-planning for the site, time, and looking at high voltage limits of approach, or overlapping cranes 6 months in advance before you get there, years in advance before the job site starts. So,
But it's not consistent, is what I'm getting at. Like, we understand the codes, but we're seeing some projects are not requiring a zone control system, and they're going over the wires.
I think that's an issue that we've already talked about, but we do see discrepancies between areas as well. So I think it'd be a benefit that we can, like different officers, different areas, so I just don't want to go too far on it. I don't know if it's just the incapability, we're not capable of meeting demand, of being on all the sites to educate, but I think it's something we can work on to make sure we have a consistent guideline.
just within WorkSafe, I will say that it's okay to say that we are working in 2020 with the construction highway strategy for an officer training piece, for the consistency of how to enforce and how to apply the regulations for 1924, 5, and 6.
Okay.
The 3 regulations related to limits of approach to power lines. So we've identified the same problem area, and been meaning to put that piece in for 2020. That will be in for officer training in Q1 of 2020.
And the reality is, if there's a situation where there's a clear level of risk and it's identified, I mean, our resources, like everyone else's, are limited. And so we need to know about it so that we can act on it, and that's the bottom line. What you're describing is a clear contravention. Workers are being placed at risk of injury. They haven't addressed it through the written assurance to deal with it. So we need to know about it so we can do it. Bottom line.
All right, I'll just end up on this here. Thank you for all your questions. I know I'm past my time. I really did not expect this. Sorry, Nick. But just to compete with Dr. Mulgrave again here, I added this little UFO there to my presentation because we're having external interference also. And I'm just asking your help, if you can help us. It's along the Canby corridor. And we are seeing actual interference, maybe not by the little red people, but it's as the more we install these systems throughout, because it's technology, we are seeing, we don't know yet, we're in discussion with SkyTrain people and other entities to try to figure out what is causing some of the interference that we're seeing that cause some of our sensors to be swaying a little bit. So if any of you want to participate in our little hunt to our external interference, you're more than welcome. Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much. You're a sign on the spaceships. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.